My title today is Using Mixed Method Research Designs to Understand the VUCA World. There is a reason why I decided that I change the title to Understanding the VUCA World, and you will shortly see why. And I'm glad that Dr. Genidza said mixed method research is quite a wide and broad area. And there are many mixed method research typologies out there. So for me, a bird does not sing because it has an answer. It sings because it has a song. So I don't have an answer to the various mixed method ways of thinking and doing research, but I have a song about how I think mixed method research designs should be conceptualized, especially when you are investigating what I've termed the VUCA world. I know some of you already know about the VUCA world. It's not a mysterious thing. But before I get into what the VUCA world is, I want us to look at these words. These words are from a very renowned singer in the United States of America. I know that some of you know Amapiano and all these current house music things. You may not really appreciate this song, but this song has a powerful message. It says, I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and you. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I see skies of blue and clouds of white, the bright blessed day, the dark sacred night. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, are also on the faces of people going by. I see friends shaking hands, saying, how do you do? They are really saying, I love you. I hear babies cry. I watch them grow. They learn much more than I will ever know. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Yes, I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Oh, yes. I know that. Thank you for listening and your patience. I know that some of you are confused to say how then this wonderful world of pet related to mixed method research. Let's go on with the story. There's yet another story I want to tell. So what Louis Armstrong is saying is that this is a wonderful world. What a wonderful world. Despite the wicked problems of poverty, racism, gender-based violence, crime, corruption, you name all the wicked problems. Despite all these wicked problems, this is a wonderful world. What a wonderful world. It is us who are making this world unwonderful, if there is such a word, because it is what we do to the world that makes it a bad world. And as researchers sitting today in this virtual space, we are trying now to reverse what man and a woman has done to this wonderful world to make it wonderful for our future grandchildren and children. But before we go on with our story, I want to take another philosophical turn. And I say that we are wanderers in this world. I want to read this poem, which says, wanderer, your footsteps are the road, and nothing more. Wanderer, there is no road. The road is made by walking. By walking, one makes the road. And upon glancing behind, one sees the path that never will be trod again. Wanderer, there is no road, only works upon the sea. I entitled my presentation using mixed methods to understand the VUCA world. And what is the VUCA world? And what is in a name? VUCA stands for volatility, normally linked to the markets. It stands for uncertainty. It stands for complexity. It stands for ambiguity. In other words, our world is constantly changing, becoming more unstable and unpredictable. And I don't think there's anyone who can challenge that. Forecasts and experiences from the past as a basis for shaping the future are losing their validity and relevance. Now I cannot say that, I saw the sun first, I know better. These things my experience is like this. Those things now are being challenged by the instability and unpredictability of the world. Personal value systems are being tested. So in this VUCA world, we need to be ready to disrupt and be disrupted. Research, for me, is a way to be disruptive in, and as long as you are being disruptive in an ethical, evidence-based way. So research can make understand this VUCA world, a world that is volatile. Markets are volatile. The rand is falling almost on a daily basis these days. There's uncertainty, there's ambiguity, there's complexity. So that is the world that you are supposed to be doing your research in. So I'm actually giving you the context in which our research is being conducted these days. So the VUCA world is challenging our wonderful world. The VUCA world is complex, and there's a need for creative and innovative researchers to help the wanderer to make sense of the planet and create the future that we want, a wonderful world. How do we start producing the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations offer a framework for action and orientation for researchers to conduct research that leads to development and social transformation. African leaders have produced a framework of development based on the SDGs and the African Union Agenda 2063. National governments have also articulated these goals and targets in national vision and development plans in an attempt to build the future that we want. In order to build the future that we want, we should appreciate that the world offers diverse and different perspectives that are too complex to be addressed by making decisions by algorithms, as in the case with artificial intelligence, for example, or regression analysis, correlation, and so on. So the objectives of this presentation is to try and trace the growth of mixed method research. MMR stands for mixed method research. And I also think that at the end of this workshop, you'll be able to differentiate between MMR and multi-methods. And you'll also be able to achieve methodological transparency when using MMR. And we also want to underscore the integration as the lifeblood of MMR studies. And we want to identify basic and complex MMR approaches. And we want to describe sampling in MMR, and also to try and invite researchers to think beyond the Anglo-Saxon MMR philosophy. When we do research in the scientific method, we are guided by 3 research methodologies: quantitative, qualitative, and mixed method research. And I'm sure in your previous engagements in these workshops, you should have been acquainted with the qualitative and quantitative research methodologies. And in this particular space today, I am discussing mixed method research. Mixed method research combines qualitative and quantitative research approaches to describe multiple realities. In other words, it taps on the strengths of qualitative and a quantitative. So when you start to think in a mixed method way of doing things, you are saying, I am thinking qualitatively and quantitatively, and I'm drawing upon the strength of these two methodologies. But what we have is a situation whereby mixed method research is not popular in many disciplines. And there are many reasons why it is not popular. And there are many reasons why people don't mix properly. And this presentation discusses situations or circumstances in which mixed method research is appropriate. And I'm also saying we must go beyond the mixed method research dialogue that is going on now and think of developing mixed methods that are beyond the Anglo-Saxon. The Anglo-Saxon, I'm talking about the American and the British and the European scholars. For such an approach will facilitate the production of knowledge that is contextually relevant and useful in religious environments. The reason why we cannot change this world and make it a wonderful world is because we don't use relevant approaches to discover or to investigate our realities. We continue to work on the basis of Western knowledge and they continue to privilege Western knowledge in our research. But if you look at the scientific method, unfortunately, that is the method that influences how we do or conduct research. When we look at the scientific method in the context of social science research, we discover that there have been 3 methodological waves. And these waves started with the quantitative wave, followed by the qualitative wave. The qualitative wave was challenging the assumptions of reality of the quantitative wave. You remember the quantitative wave assumed that reality was 1. And despite the number of researchers that look at that reality, those researchers must come to the same conclusion. And that's how the scientific method started. And a lot of people indeed started to say that every subject is scientific. I remember during my time, I was studying history, and there were scholars like C-A-R-R, who were arguing that history was a scientific discipline. And we all agreed with them because we were actually under the veil of quantitative research and positivism. But the way people like myself started questioning, because in positivism, for example, I can give you an extreme example. If you are a positivist, you believe that what you cannot touch does not exist. What you cannot see does not exist. So in the positivism, there are no prophets, because prophets cannot see what they prophesy. In the world of positivism, there's no love, because you can't touch love. I'm pausing there because I know that many people are wondering whether I'm being serious. And that's what the reality of positivism was. So it was qualitative people started to say, no. But love is there. The world is interpreted. There are multiple realities. So there was a crisis in the scientific method. So the qualitative wave brought about a crisis because they were saying the assumptions of positivism were wrong. The world is phenomenologically, it is a phenomenon which is interpreted, which is constructed. It was these phenomenologists that actually you can think of Heda and other authors who actually challenged the quantitative stance. So now there were 2 methodologies, qualitative and quantitative. The quantitative people were not respecting the qualitative people. Because the quantitative people were saying, you people, how do you validate stories? You tell stories, stories are not facts, stories are not evidence. And then the qualitative people said, no, in our case, we don't validate our stories. We triangulate methods in order to have a credible story. We triangulate methods in order to have a dependable story. We triangulate methods in order to have a transferable story. And by triangulating methods here, they were not, they were, by triangulating methods here, what they meant is they were using more than one method to look at reality. In other words, when you look at reality from more than one angle, you are likely to get a comprehensive picture. And you will be aware that triangulation comes from navigation science, where you place beacons to guide the ships at sea. So for you to make sure that those beacons are at the appropriate and proper place, you need to actually look at it from different angles. So triangulation is nothing more than looking at a research problem from more than one angles. I know that most of you have actually experimented with triangulation, and you know that it's just a use of more than one method to research a social phenomenon. And then the quantitative people paused when they heard that. They realized that there was power in triangulation, and they also adopted triangulation. This was the starting point of quantitative and qualitative people working together. This was the starting point where they were no longer worried about their philosophical assumptions of reality, and they started to work together. And this was the birth of the mixed method research methodology, which was a third methodological movement. And it buried the paradigm wars. When we talk of the philosophical assumptions, when we talk about our assumptions of reality, or what counts as knowledge. Some of you, I know, you are sophisticated. You think of epistemology, but I'm not going to use that word because when it was introduced to me, I spent 30 years trying to understand what it meant. So I wouldn't want to also subject you to that kind of journey. So I'll just use assumptions of the reality, assumptions of what counts as knowledge. So they had different assumptions. As I said, qualitative people believe that there were multiple realities, and the quantitative people believed there was only one reality. But with the coming of the mixed method research, these two realities are brought together. And mixed method research, therefore, provides multiple perspectives. And that's why it is attractive, because you can actually provide multiple perspectives in a single study. You don't have to do a qualitative study and then write and finish and interpret and provide the results. And then for you to answer some questions that you cannot answer quantitatively, you now start doing another qualitative study. But this time around, these are combined together. You don't have to wait for years to do it, for months to do it. They are combined in different ways. So mixed method research offers an explanatory, exploratory, and a confirmatory understanding of a phenomenon in one study by combining qualitative and quantitative strategies. Mixed method research also has the potential to provide a relatively more comprehensive picture that could be obtained from using a mono methodology. Current research issues warrant multifaceted research designs and methods. We remember in our introduction, we said we are living in a complex world, we are living in a volatile world, we are living in an ambiguous world, and etc. and etc. The world is non-linear, so it needs a comprehensive way of actually investigating it. This is a framework just I brought about. Remember, my other life, I was a quantitative researcher before I became a qualitative and then a mixed method researcher. So you can see, therefore, that the paradigm of quantitative research is positivism, and the paradigm of qualitative research is interpretivism. And the paradigm that we are looking at today is pragmatism, which is the paradigm of mixed method research. I think in a way, I've actually described how we arrived here. I told you that triangulation was the forerunner of mixed method research. And this is why, as a result of triangulation, scholars in the quantitative and qualitative circles really realized that their approaches were not opposed and divergent. And in the history of mixed method research, these scholars, Green, Calaseli, and Graham, and Creswell, they occupy a special timeline because they are the one that actually played a great role to the point where mixed method research became a separate methodological orientation with its own worldview, vocabulary, and techniques. This is why you'll find that my presentation actually is basically biased and informed by Creswell, because there are many mixed methods research designs that you can find. But because of the role that Creswell played, I think we need to give him respect and actually accept and use his mixed method way of thinking and conducting research. So when you look at the history of the mixed method research, we find that the 1950s and 1980s, these were formative years. These were the years where Creswell and Green operates in the education field mainly. And Creswell, well, Creswell is multidisciplinary, but generally speaking, is also in the health sciences. So they struggled to make mixed method research an acceptable methodology. And as mixed method researchers, we should be aware of these evolutionary stages of the methodology. Because if you are not aware of these evolutionary days or stages, you are going to be using old terminology, the old language of mixed method research. The language of mixed method research has evolved over time, and it started to crystallize or to be established around 2010. So if you are reading mixed method texts, try to read texts that were written after 2010, because it is at that point that the use of mixed method research starts to crystallize. In other words, for example, before 2010, triangulation was considered as one of the mixed method research designs. And I've heard actually recently one of my students submitting a proposal telling me that he was going to use the triangulation mixed method research design. There is no such design anymore. That design was buried in the period between 2010 and 2015. Indeed, if you look at Creswell and Plano Clark, one of our authorities in mixed method research designs, you will find that they drop triangulation as a mixed method research design in their book in 2011, and they never speak about it again. So I'm actually using this example to show you that you must try to read recent sources when you are doing mixed method research, and try to read books that are on mixed methods rather than books that have chapters on mixed methods. Though the books with chapters on mixed methods are also useful, but it is good to read actually the major sources. Like if you read Creswell and Plano Clark, you read Tasha Corey, Treadle and Johnson 2023, for example, those will be useless. I mean, sorry, those will be useful because the other ones that were written before that are useless in a way, useless in quotation marks, of course. Excuse my language and vocabulary. So the reason why I am bothering about all this introduction is because mixed method research is a very contested terrain. Some people talk about mixed method research as multi-methods research. Some people talk of it as multiple methods, some talk of it as blended research and mixed research and so forth. But the term multi-methods has been largely discarded in mixed method research. So if you find a mixed method researcher using the term multi-method, it means that that mixed method researcher is using old literature and old terminology. Because multi-methods is different from mixed method research in the sense that in mixed method research, we integrate across the entire research process. And for that reason, the difference between mixed method research and multi-method research must be preserved because they are different. Mixed method research involves more than simply collecting two types of data. Because many people say, I collected data through a questionnaire that was quantitative. Then I interviewed a few participants that was qualitative. Therefore, I am using mixed methods. No, you are not using mixed methods. You are using multi-methods. You are triangulating methods. That is the kind of approach that I would expect at master's level. I will tell you why. I know master's people can do mixed method research. I'm not saying they cannot do it, but from my point of view, I always advise my own students to do multi-methods, which is triangulation, rather than mixed method research. Because in triangulation, you are just using qualitative methods and quantitative methods in order to corroborate evidence, or to corroborate evidence, or to show if there is divergence or convergence. That's all. Mixed integration is central characteristic of mixed method research. It is the central characteristic. It is the lifeblood of mixed method research. So when you are saying you are using mixed method research, there should be integration. The integration must be at design level. I'm going to show you how. The integration must be at data collection level, in the sense that you must collect both qualitative and quantitative data. Then you integrate those two data sets in order to get a superior output or to get superior inferences than you would have done when using one methodology. Therefore, mixed method research is a distinct methodology beyond the mere inclusion of both qualitative and quantitative methods in a study. Mixed methods and multi-methods are different. The premise of mixing or integrating data is the distinguishing factor of mixed method research. So when you are doing mixed method research, you need to be methodologically transparent. And indeed, when you're doing any other form of research. But it becomes very important, as you are going to see, why methodological transparency is important in mixed method research. And this is where, when someone says, I'm a mixed method researcher, just look at this list and ask him these questions. And even yourself, as you say, I am a mixed method researcher, take a step back and introspect and ask yourself these questions. Because methodological transparency is key to gauging the quality and the rigor of a research study. And according to these three authors, methodological transparency is the degree of detail and disclosure about the specific steps, decisions, and judgment calls made during a scientific study. So, disclosure about steps, decisions, and judgment calls. And I always request the students that I supervise to say, after writing the methodology chapter, they must disclose to me, as a way of conclusion, what specific steps did they take as they met the various challenges in the research journey? What decisions did they make to make sure that the research was valid and reliable? And what judgment calls did they make to ensure that whoever wants to replicate or to do the study in the same way will be able to do it in a scientific way? So low methodological transparency results in unreliable and untrustworthy research findings. The issue of methodological transparency is important in mixed method research, considering that mixed method research is evolving and holds the promise of providing an approach to investigating and capturing the complexity of phenomena comprehensively. That implies that researchers should fully describe and report the methods used for others to understand and realize its value added and to adopt it. Researchers should be open about the choices and procedures they follow to achieve a high degree of methodological transparency. Misperceptions about and ambiguity in the application of mixed method research in many fields accentuate the need for methodological transparency. So the indicators of methodological transparency are: one, sources used. You must get a solid footing from the existing literature. And as I have said, in that chapter, I do show that you should read current sources to avoid conceptual problems related to the evolution of MMR. And I have already stated how triangulation that was popularized by Green and colleagues is no longer regarded as an appropriate term to use to refer to mixed method research design. So sources are important. I have already alluded to that. Then there's the philosophical stance. The philosophical assumptions of MMR are ill-defined and unestablished. At PhD level, I expect this discourse. I know that everyone who has written to me in his or her proposal, they will tell you the philosophical assumption of MMR is pragmatism, because it combines positivism and interpretivism, and that's what distinguishes it from positivism and interpretivism. For a master's, I will excuse you. There's no problem. But if you are at PhD level, you are supposed to philosophize about methodologies. So I will expect you to problematize the whole philosophical landscape of MMR. Because if you go to Green, for example, Green says mixed method research assumes that there are many ways of knowing. So if we are just going to use pragmatism, which is an Anglo-Saxon philosophy, we are actually avoiding the discourse of mixed method research, which actually considers the fact that there are many ways of knowing. It acknowledges the fact that there are many ways of knowing. So there should be many ways of philosophizing. Why, for example, in the South African context, can we not use Ubuntu as a philosophy of mixed method research? Maybe the question is, how do we do it? Maybe before we end this presentation, I'll be able to say one or two things about that. The other indicator of transparency is the appropriateness of MMR and its value added. You should actually demonstrate that by using both quantitative and qualitative research methods is better than using either of them alone. And you must also articulate the main reasons for using MMR. To say that I wanted to get a comprehensive picture is not enough. And the other indicator, which is the fourth one on my list, is specifying the research design. This is where you can catch those people who hide behind the term mixed methods. I'm using mixed methods. Okay, you are using mixed methods, I agree. But what is your specific research design? Because in MMR, in mixed method research, we have specific designs. And if you are saying you are a mixed method researcher, we expect you to use one of those designs. And those designs are divided into simple and advanced designs. So you must be saying, I'm a mixed method researcher and my design is simple or complex. And that shows that you are mixing, you have an intention to mix. By specifying your design, you are showing that you have intention to mix quantitative and qualitative methodologies. And then after that, and this is the major problem that actually I've witnessed in many studies that were conducted using mixed method research designs. The sampling techniques, they are not mixed method research sampling techniques. Yes, we built upon the probability and the non-probability sampling techniques, but mixed method research emphasizes on the sampling relationships, on what is sampling and what is sampled and the sampling relationships. The sampling relationships can be identical, parallel, nested, multi-level. So by using those relationships, you find that you get around the problems of, for example, quantitative assumptions. In quantitative research, for you to do statistical manipulations, you need to have a certain number. But when you use the relationships of samples, you don't have to be trapped into those quantitative assumptions. You can actually get out of them by using sampling relationships rather than simple assumptions of sampling representativity. And the relationship should be explained to achieve methodological transparency. I'm going to touch base on those before we end this presentation. And then the other indicator is integration. And that is those 4, 5, and 6, sampling and integration. I do a lot of content analysis of theses. And indeed now I'm in the process of doing content analysis of theses produced in the College of Education. And I'm looking at sampling techniques and integration. To what extent these researchers were transparent insofar as they explained the sampling techniques and insofar as they integrated their studies. Because integration is the key methodological concept in mixed method research. Integration is the heart and soul of MMR. Researchers should describe how integration occurred, where it occurred. Did it occur at the research dimension? At the research dimension where you specify the research design, data collection, multiple phase, and finding and interpretations. So to sum up transparency, Heroes and Creswell wrote this article this year. They say, and they actually agree with what we have been discussing. They say there should be a rationale for mixed methods. You should not just use it because your lecturer or the reviewers of your article say you must use the mixed method research. You must use mixed method research if there's going to be a value that you are going to get from using both qualitative and quantitative methodologies. And you must have quantitative, qualitative, and mixed methods questions. And you must have separate quantitative and qualitative data. I think we are recapping on that because we've already said it. And you must have a mixed method research design and a diagram. This diagram, part of it, I had missed it until this article because I have never emphasized to my students that they must have a diagram. But now if you submit to me any proposal or any thesis that claims to be using mixed method research, I will expect the diagram. I will expect the diagram. I'll show you some of the diagrams. And I will expect to see some kind of integration in either joint displays and meta inferences. Then you will be transparently using mixed method research. So therefore, the question that you are asking yourself is the topic best approached using MMR, what is my philosophical stance? Am I using recent and appropriate sources? Is choosing either the quantitative or qualitative approach not sufficient to address the research problem? Is the research problem suitable for MMR? Why am I applying MMR? You must justify that. At what stage am I going to mix? Do my research question address both the qualitative and the quantitative data? And what MMR design am I going to use? What quantitative and qualitative data am I going to collect? How am I going to validate both qualitative and qualitative research strategies? You can also look at the decision tree for MMR that I did with my colleague, Professor Rom. But my recent attempt to have another framework to guide you in going about doing MMR, like with this diagram, which you can find in that source, and that source is at the end of this presentation. So we agreed that when you are doing MMR, you start with your philosophical stance. And we've agreed that pluralism and pragmatism are the underlying assumptions of your paradigm. And we've actually also agreed that there are many approaches when you are doing mixed method research, but they are basically divided into two. The first one that you see, if you are looking at the same screen with me, to your left is sequential, exploratory, sequential, explanatory, concurrent or parallel convergent. Those are the simple mixed method research designs. And then to your right, we have experiments or intervention trials, we have transformative and multi-stage. Those are your complex designs. And then sampling, we agreed that it can be identical, parallel, nested, multi-level. And then collecting data, of course, it can be a variety of those methods: interviews, questionnaires, tests, observation, network analysis, and so forth. And then at the end, you must actually discuss the issue of the extent to which your proposal or your paper addresses transparency in terms of rigor and quality. So from that diagram, we are saying, I gave you two basic approaches in MMR, but there are many designs, as those authors, Tedry and Johnson and others, they show that there are many MMR designs described in the literature. But today, I'm sharing with you the two basic approaches that were championed by Creswell and Plano Clark. And these two basic approaches are parallel and sequential. Even if you go to the other MMR designs, the underlying philosophy of conducting MMR either as a parallel implementation or as a sequential design, that is the fundamental understanding and the core dimensions of MMR designs. The core MMR designs include sequential, exploratory, sequential, explanatory, and concurrent or parallel convergent. So for me, when you come to me and say you are doing mixed method research design, I will say, which design are you going to use? Then you say, I'm going to use a simple design. If it is a simple design, then I am expecting you to choose between those three simple designs. Or if you are a PhD student, you say, no, I'm not going to do simple, I'm going to do advanced or complex MMR designs, which go beyond the simple designs. Then you are looking at intervention, social justice, multiple stage and evaluation designs. Those are the designs that we are going to use there. And I don't think, I'm not going to really go into details about these designs because I don't think that for me today, my brief is to introduce you to the core, to the simple. Then you will grow from the simple to the core as you grow an appetite for research methodologies. So the sequential, as you can see, sequentially, it means one after the other in sequence, in an order, in a defined order. The order cannot be defined by you. If you say it is sequential exploratory, it means that the order is predefined. If it is exploratory, it means that you are going to collect qualitative data first and collect quantitative data in the second stage. That is exploratory. I think all of you are familiar with the fact that qualitative researchers explore because they always want to get deeper understanding. They always want to investigate issues that have not been fully that has not been fully investigated. They always want to be very exploratory, very innovative, and creative. So they want to explore new areas. They don't want to explore dead research areas where a lot is known, where people just confirm and where people just confirm about what is happening. So when you say I am a mixed method researcher who is using a sequential exploratory design, it means that we are going to collect qualitative data first and analyze that data. After analyzing that data, you may develop an instrument. That is the second stage. You collect data and analyze it. And then after collecting and analyzing qualitative data, you now develop an instrument. Actually, traditionally, this design was used for instrument development. What am I saying? You remember I said qualitative researchers, they look at areas that are not well known. So if the area is not well known, it means that even the variables or the constructs or the concepts to measure are not widely known. So you go to the context of your study. For example, if you want to understand indigenous people, the concepts about indigenous knowledge, some of them, they are not well known. So you go to the indigenous people, interview them, conduct focus group areas, and understand the phenomenon that you want to investigate. You uncover the concepts, the variables, the constructs from the indigenous people. Then you want to generalize those results to other indigenous people, either in South Africa, either in Southern Africa, either in Sub-Saharan Africa. And then you conduct a survey using a questionnaire, collecting quantitative data in order to generalize your results. Many people have conceptual problems when they hear the word survey. Say, now, how then I'm using MMR, but I'm surveying. Yes, you are surveying because you are using a quantitative instrument and approach to collect data within the exploratory design. So there's nothing wrong to say the second phase was a survey of all indigenous people in order to generalize the results. And the first phase, it can be informed by a case study. It can be informed by grounded theory, for example. Then you develop a theory from grounded theory. Then in your second part of the quantitative part, you are now testing that theory. So you can actually carry out a study using grounded theory in the first phase of your exploratory MMR design. Then from the grounded theory study, you develop a theory. And as a result, you say, now I want to test the theory. I don't want to leave it to other quantitative researchers to test it. I want to test it myself. Then you do the second part of your study, which is the quantitative study that tests that theory. And then, so therefore, if you look at this diagram, we collect qualitative data and analyze it, and we develop an instrument. After developing an instrument, we carry out a quantitative study in order to generalize our results, or we design an experiment in order to generalize our results. Or we can develop a theory from qualitative data and test that theory in the quantitative phase. I think that is what I am actually explaining in those notes, and I think you've been reading through them. So the other, now, before I go to the other, so if you are a master's student, maybe let's discuss it after this one. So the other sequential design is explanatory. Obviously, if you are explanatory, you start by collecting quantitative data. You collect quantitative data. And from the quantitative data, mostly quantitative data, we collect it through experiments, we collect it through surveys. From these surveys, we get significant results. When I was a quantitative researcher, I was very lazy. Why was I lazy? If I got outliers, I just threw them away. I took them as some kind of noise in my data. And indeed, most of my quantitative counterparts, they still go that route. Like, oh, this is these are outliers, they make noise. And you remember, it is us quantitative people who think that they are mad people. But those people are not behaving like us, and we think that they are mad. But if you're a mixed method researcher who thinks in a complex way, there is no mad person. Those people are different. And if you are a mixed method researcher, you will understand the gender dynamics and the gender differences. That gender is not a fixed construct, it's a constructed construct. And therefore, those people who are different from us, who, for example, profess to be gendered in a different way, they are not abnormal, they are not outliers. We must understand them. So such significant results, when you get them as a quantitative researcher, you think that these people are different. You need now to explain why they are different. And that is where your qualitative data collection comes in. That's where your qualitative methodology comes in. You now collect qualitative data in order to explain the differences that you get in your data. You now collect qualitative data in order even to explain significant results in your data. And they probably even explain them to the extent of developing a theory. So this cannot be done by a master's student. Why? Because a master's student does not have time to collect quantitative data, analyze it, then collect qualitative data, analyze it, and then draw inferences. You remember our master's is 3 years. And as a master's student, you just have to master either quanti or quali. Then to show that you are sophisticated, then you can triangulate your methods. And then you can enhance the validity of your study. You don't waste time doing mixed method research, but it's up to you. This is my advice. Because of my experience as a mixed method researcher, I realized that at master's level, we are trying to master methodologies, and then you can now experiment and philosophize with methodologies when you do your PhD. So the third and last is the convergent mixed method research design. As you can see, this is not very different from triangulation, because here you collect qualitative and quantitative data. So many people confuse this design with mixed methods as in triangulation. So in this design, data is collected almost concurrently. And in this design, as I said, it was once considered a mixed method research design until 2011 and 2016. It happened that people said it should be abandoned. So in the convergent design, data collection occurs in a parallel manner or almost concurrently. The data are collected almost simultaneously for validation, including establishing convergence or collaboration and divergence in the data. This design can answer both exploratory and confirmatory questions. The sample used for the data collection can comprise the same or different individuals. You remember in your traditional quantitative methods, you cannot use the sample. You cannot use the same sample for your collecting data. For example, if you use this sample for pre-testing your questionnaire, you cannot use the same sample for collecting data. But in mixed method research, you can use the same sample or different individuals or different sample. Integration basically occurs at 3 levels. Stating an MMR question, combining the qualitative and the quantitative findings, and producing meta inferences from the data. Now, let me quickly go over the complex designs. Complex designs use simple designs as their starting point. So you cannot become complex before you become simple. So you need actually to conduct a simple MMR study for you to raise your study to the level of a complex study. So this is why I said I'm not going to bother you a lot about the complex one, because it is if you understand the simple, it will be easier for you to transition to the complex mixed method research designs. And most of these designs are used in large projects. In other words, what I'm trying to say is, for you to be complex, you must have an MMR perspective. And that perspective is developed by having a simple MMR design. So it is advisable to understand the core, that is the simple MMR designs, and the reasons for choosing them before venturing into complex applications. Advanced MMR designs are usually used in large studies, as I said, which involve several researchers, multiple phases being conducted over several years. Using advanced mixed research methods demonstrates a good understanding of the full spectrum of MMR designs. However, many questions can be answered, by using simple mixed method designs. So why bother by going to the complex ones? Because these complex ones, normally, they are used in interventions. Those are normally in policy environments, I think, in environments where you use action research, for example, and then environments where you have an intervention that you have made, be it a health or be it a developmental one. So that's where you will use complex ones to understand the essence of the intervention. And some people refer to complex designs as hybrid designs, because the hybrid, because it uses the core and the complex. And as I said in my diagram, these designs include intervention trials, mixed method action research, and transformative MMR. So in this one, when you are using a mixed method experimental design or interventionist, these ones, they can be attractive, I'm sure, to people in the natural sciences. This involves embedding or nesting a basic mixed method design into a primary research tradition. Nesting a basic, remember those three, those core three, into a primary research tradition. Remember, classical designs such as qualitative and quantitative, they have primary research traditions. For example, when you look at the quantitative, one of the primary research traditions is experiments or surveys. Qualitative, we can have phenomenology, grounded theory, and etc. and etc. So, for example, interviews may be integrated into a primary quantitative research design, such as an experiment. Since the secondary method carries less weight than the primary research design, then the mixing of the two enables the researcher to gain advantages of both. So the experiment will be taking precedence, because you know that traditionally in experiments, we just experiment and we come to the results. But then when we are mixing, we can now introduce a qualitative component in order to understand how the experiment can be effectively used to give valid results. And I think even in interventions, normally you have your intervention. So you want to see, like we prescribe some medicine for a certain population. You want to see, you will see them getting healed. But you may want to find out from those people how the healing took place and how the taking of the medicines took place, rather than the mechanical way of saying you take water in the morning and you drink the medicine and after 4 days you are okay. You may want to see the developments within those 4 days, but you cannot see them in the experiment or in the intervention, but we have to ask the people, and then that becomes complex mixed method research design. And also, for example, if you are going to be complex using the indigenous people, you may want actually to carry out a focus group discussion with indigenous people in order to understand the variables that you want to measure. Then after you have actually understood the variables, then you may want actually to have an experimental interventions, but you are using the variables from the qualitative, or maybe the very simple way which you may not agree with me is when you visit your doctor. All doctors use the mixed method approach when they are treating you. When you get in their room, they'll ask you, how are you? How can I help you today? Then you say, I got flu. They ask you when, how, where did you travel, who were in contact with, how long with them. So those are qualitative questions for me, which actually, in a ways, they are in the realm of a case study. Then they now prescribe, that is the quantitative part, to say this is going to be the intervention to make sure that you are able to deal with your eye ailment. This is a very elementary and a simplistic way you can look at it when you try to understand and conceptualize mixed method research. And there's also mixed method action research, which is mixing methods within an existing methodological approach. For example, you know, traditionally, action research is generally quali, but you can actually move from quali to quant within action research and move from quanti to quali. So you are actually integrating the qualitative and the quantitative components of the research within the underlying methodological approach. So the underlying methodological approach becomes the placeholder. So action research as a methodological approach is a placeholder. grounded theory as a methodological approach can be a placeholder, and so forth and so forth. Phenomenology, for example, also can be a placeholder. But the prerequisite is that, the MMR prerequisite is a prerequisite for these approaches to be part of an advanced application. In other words, both qualitative and quantitative data must be collected, and the integration must occur for this to be called an advanced MMR design. So you can have your normal phenomenological approach, but it may not be an advanced MMR application because you are not worried about integration. You are not worried about getting inferences from your phenomenological research. And indeed, maybe your phenomenological research is basically qualitative. It is not quantitative. But if you introduce the quantitative part, which you can by quantizing the qualitative data, then you can quantize and measure quantitatively that phenomenon, and then integrate that data into the qualitative data. Then that becomes an advanced mixed method research design. So it is mixing within an existing methodological approach. And I think this one is very simple, and I'm finding it very interesting in my studies. Mixing within an existing methodological approach. This is the last one, transformative. This one is championed by people like by Bieber and Mertens, but Mertens is the major proponent of this. This is sometimes called a participatory social justice design. Research methods may be mixed within a theoretical framework. The integration is driven by theory. So the social justice theory, such as feminism or frame theory, can be used as the foundation of mixing qualitative and quantitative approaches. The theoretical perspective influences all decisions about how the mixing or the design is going to be conducted. The transformative mixed methods research design arose out of an attempt to use a theoretical perspective to integrate qualitative and quantitative research into a research framework. Transformative approaches have the potential to yield cultural responsive interventions and to address wicked problems such as climate disasters, poverty, pandemics such as the coronavirus, and make this world a wonderful world. That's what Mertens say. Such transformative approaches provide a framework for examining assumptions that explicitly address power issues, social justice, cultural complexities throughout the whole research process. For the times when we do our research, we don't look at the power dynamics. We don't even look at the social justice dynamics. We do research for the sake of getting a piece of paper called a master's or PhD. But Mertens is calling upon us to say our research should be informed by transformative assumptions, and then we can integrate qualitative and quantitative data within those transformative assumptions. And again, the transformative assumption remains the placeholder. So the integration of qualitative and quantitative approaches is in the transformative approaches is done to achieve the desired change, is done to understand climate change, is done to understand poverty. So you do qualitative and quantitative data collection and integrate them in a transformative way in order to get the desired result. I said that I was going to briefly look at sampling. So we agreed that we have our classical sampling approaches, that is probability and non-probability for quanti and non-probability for quali. And these can be used in MMR, as some of you have always been using them. But Collins and his colleague, is it his or her colleague, they say that MMR have or employs unique sampling techniques. That's what once you start doing MMR, you must appreciate that you must go beyond the classical sampling approaches because MMR employs unique sampling techniques. The relationship between the quantitative and the qualitative samples should be used or may be used. These relationships should be, the samples identical? Like, for example, if you are looking at the use of UNISA library by students. So you are looking at the students using the UNISA library. And in this case, I will use an explanatory mixed method research design. I will start off by carrying out a survey of almost a representative sample of all UNISA students, using, of course, the assumptions of traditional sampling approaches. Then after that, that is one of my samples. I may decide to use another part of the sample of the student to understand some of the significant results from my study. That is identical. I'm using students for both the quanti and the quali. In the quantitative research assumptions, that is not always advised to use the same sample in the study. But because here you are using the assumptions of mixed method research design, you can use we can use part of the students for the quantitative study, and they use the other part of the students in the qualitative phase. How then do you identify those students that have actually, how then do you identify those students that you are going to use for your qualitative phase? Because the survey was anonymous. Because if the survey was not anonymous, you will simply go to those students that gave you results that are divergent from most of the students. But you use those results, even if they are anonymous, as a basis of approaching maybe 4 or maybe 3 to 10 students. You remember in qualitative studies, numbers don't matter. Engage those 3 to 10 students into the data that is divergent from the other students. And then that will be your qualitative phase of your explanatory mixed method research design. And we are using identical samples. But within the same study, I can send out a questionnaire to the students, a representative sample for all the students. But instead of using students in my second phase, which is the qualitative phase, I go to the people who work in the library, especially those in circulation, yes, and also searches and maybe, and all those departments. And then I actually purposively say from my quantitative study, I have found out that students are saying this. And what do they say? Then I engage them in a qualitative either interview or either in a focus group interview or any other form of interview. Then I collect my qualitative data to explain my quantitative results. So in this time around, I'm using parallel samples because remember I've got students and I've got people who work in the library. So those are parallel samples. So you can use identical samples the way I have said, and parallel as I have shown. Then you can read about the nested sample. The nested sample really is where the sample members are selected from one component of the study to represent a subset of those participants selected from the other strand. It is quite complex as well. So I just wanted to show you a little illustration of parallel and identical, and then you can actually whet your appetite by reading the others. Because obviously, remember, I start from the simple to the complex. Identical and parallel, they are very simple. And the identical parallel, actually, it helped one of my PhD students, because he found himself with a population of about 15 people. And from a population of 15 people, you cannot use the same population if you are using quantitative assumptions. If you are using mixed method research assumptions, you can actually use identical sampling techniques to say my population or my sample is identical. The other one is taken from this part of the population. The other one is taken from this part of the population. That is possible. So mixed method research really helps us to deal with some other conceptual problems that are very much alive in the classical methodological approaches. So we said integration was the lifeblood of mixed method research. And indeed, integration is a core principle of mixed method studies. Researchers are expected to describe the way in which integration was effected in their investigation. This is the core, ladies and gentlemen. You must describe the way in which integration was effected in their investigation. Reading other pieces from today onwards, I want to see this description, and then you will be methodologically transparent, and then we will be convinced that you are using mixed method research and not multi-methods. So data integration refers to the methodological process through which a researcher consciously mixes. So the mixing must be conscious. This is why you must tell us the design, because it's a conscious decision that I'm going to use explanatory, or I'm going to use exploratory, or I'm going to use convergent. It's a conscious decision. And you must show how this combination relates to the type of design you are using. That's what I mean. If you are using exploratory, I demonstrated that the combination must always be quali to quant. So there are other ways of integrating that has been suggested by Green and Caraseli. They talk of data transformation. They talk of typology development. They talk of extreme case analysis. But as you are aware, extreme case analysis will be your outliers. They talk of data consolidation or imaging. These are terms that you'll see they relate to what we're about to say here. So this view by Fetters, it says you must specify the design used in the collection. That resonates with Creswell. You must specify the design. And we have actually those designs there: convergent, explanatory, sequential, exploratory, sequential, and multi-stage, which is complex. And at the level of the methods, you must show whether this design is helping you to connect with the other one, or you are building on this design to go to the other one. And then what Fetters and his colleagues, the integration must be at interpretation and reporting levels. So interpretation and reporting levels, it means that you are merging or consolidating the data. It may mean also that you are transforming the data in order to merge it or to consolidate it. It may mean that you are quantizing qualitative data in order to combine it with quantitative data. You're quantitativizing qualitative data in order to combine it with quantitative data, or you are quantizing quantitative data in order to combine it with qualitative data. That is data transformation, that is data interpretation. So therefore, the possible locations of integration in a study are design, data collection, data analysis, and the results section, especially for experiments. So when you are merging data in integrating your data, this occurs mainly in the convergent design. You remember you collect data almost at the same time, and then you merge that data. I will correct the spelling there. An analysis of qualitative and quantitative data are brought together and compared. You are merging. Then explanation of data occurs in explanatory designs. Qualitative data are used to explain quantitative results. Building of the data occurs in an exploratory design. Qualitative data are used to build an instrument or theory for the quantitative phase. Embedding of the data occurs in advanced intervention design. Qualitative data is used to support quantitative data, for example, in an experiment. Integration can be presented in arrays, for instance, in convergent designs. Researcher can start with quantitative results and follow with qualitative ones. Then we can have joint displays in tables or graphs, that is arrays of the results together in a table or graph to facilitate comparison. So here you are trying to compare qualitative and quantitative results. So you put the quantitative statistical results side by side with qualitative themes. Then you are really sophisticated MMR researcher, and this is what we call joint displays, where you compare quantitative results with qualitative themes in the same table. Right. As we are now getting to the end of our story, there's another element which is missing in most mixed method research studies I have looked at. And the element is of data analysis. People, I think we agree that mixed method research has grown in popularity. However, software design has taken a while to catch up with the expansion of the field. The subject of data analysis of mixed methods data has been neglected. Consequently, many MMR researchers use various types of computer applications in a single study. For example, they use SPSS, I'm sure you're familiar with it, statistical packages for social scientists or social analysis, and VIVO to conduct MMR data analysis concurrently or consecutively. You know that SPSS is for quanti and NVivo is for quali, or at UNISA you use the Atlas TI instead of NVivo, but still people analyze their data using SPSS. And then after finishing that analysis, they go to their qualitative data, then they use NVivo. But what I have seen in most cases, especially explanatory mixed method research designers, they use SPSS to analyze their quantitative data, and then they use manual strategies to analyze their qualitative data. and they are never actually entirely integrated at the end. They still kind of stand as two data sets. So given that integration is the lifeblood of MMR, researchers run the danger of not integrating the data adequately by utilizing a variety of computer applications. There is a need, for example, to use MAX UDA. This software was named after Max Weber. So those of you in sociology, you know Max Weber. So that first one stands for that gentleman in sociology. Computer application, because it supports wider, it supports mixed method research. It also uses artificial intelligence to assist users with auto transcription. So this software can actually combine tables, combine thematic codes, and convert them into a variable. So in that way, you can see it integrates a numerical variable and integrates a numerical variable with a thematic code and actually brings about one variable. In that way, there's total integration. And there are also other implementation like the DOS, which is a web-based data analysis software that you can actually use. So this screen is actually just to highlight to you that as a mixed method researcher, you need to move away from the computer application, software applications that are used either in quanti or quali, and you must use the mixed method research computer applications. Who knows, you can also develop an application because, for example, DROS was developed by a student who was actually trying to analyze. Yes, I think it was developed by a student who was trying to analyze qualitative and quantitative data. So students can also use and develop software for research, for mixed method research. So I actually challenge you to actually come up with a new software applications to analyze mixed method research designs. I was not able to do it because, as you are aware, I joined this journey very late in my research life. So I give the baton to you to kind of take over and see whether you can develop a software application with all these artificial intelligence tools. You can easily develop a software application to analyze mixed method research data. I think finally, maybe not in conclusion, but finally, I want to briefly look at the voice from the wilderness. The voice from the wilderness is the voice that does not come from the Anglo-Saxon world. Remember, we are all operating in the Anglo-Saxon world, and we are not paying attention to the voice from the wilderness. The voice of from the wilderness is the philosophical assumptions of other voices other than the Anglo-Saxon voices. The mixed methods way of thinking, as Jennifer Green refers to it, is growing. And that calls for us to move away from the predominantly Anglo-Saxon worldview when doing MMR. This is very important, especially for post-colonial scholars who have been struggling to make sense of Eurocentric oriented research methodologies that tend to reproduce stagnant and contextually irrelevant knowledge based on research questions that do not fully address pressing indigenous developmental issues and the conditions created by decades of Western and Anglo-Saxon domination. The entire dependence of pragmatism as an MMR philosophy can lead to epistemic injustice in research. When the need to produce, I quote, when the need to produce knowledge is based on what is globally known or not known, rather than on what is locally known or not known, a credibility deficit is imposed on local knowledge. So by integrating the voices from the wilderness, we are able to address this deficit and achieve epistemic justice. However, what is globally known in the Anglo-Saxon pragmatist philosophy of MMR may not be applicable to the local environment. Therefore, there's a need to accommodate other philosophical assumptions alongside pragmatism when conducting MMR. And this has been acknowledged by Creswell and Plano Clark and other authors that are or authorities in mixed methods research. As early as 2003, you can see because Creswell starts this crusade around 1994, but in 2003, he concedes that there are many MMR designs that may not fit into one paradigm. So why are we fitting all our work as MMR workers in one design? That implies that philosophical assumptions of mixed method research are multiple. And this is what I expect from PhD students. And the researcher's choice of a paradigm is detected by the research design and context. So context must be integrated into the pragmatist philosophical assumption. And that will actually make it, that will actually make MMR attractive to everybody around the globe. And it will become a global research methodology. And one way of actually integrating MMR into our indigenous ways of thinking is one concept that some of you are familiar with, is the two-eyed seeing framework. The two-eyed seeing framework is saying we are living in a reality of Western knowledge. We cannot wake up one day and say we are throwing it away because we want indigenous knowledge. We need to use two eyes. One eye is the eye that we've always been using, the Western eye. And then the other eye is to open the eye that was closed by the Western knowledge, and that is the indigenous eye. And if we combine the two, that is the two-eyed seeing framework, and we are likely to get a superior knowledge than before. We are likely to get a comprehensive knowledge than before, in line with the mixed methods way of thinking, in line with the mixed method research way of researching. In conclusion, mixed method research accommodates multiple perspectives and many ways of knowing and seeing. It provides a safe space for other knowledge systems. It does not privilege other epistemologies over the others. The pragmatic and accommodative nature of MMR has the potential to foster epistemic and cognitive freedom in the global south. Indigenous epistemologies have gained a foothold in research methodology discourse. However, MMR, with its emphasis on multiple perspectives, a promise of offering a comprehensive picture of phenomenon and the capacity of obtaining better inferences, has potential to affirm indigenous research methodologies, especially in advanced mixed methods applications, such as the embedded or the multi-phase designs, in line with the two-eyed SIG framework, which is valued by many societies in the Global South. The framework integrates the strengths of indigenous epistemologies with the strengths of Western ways of knowing and seeing. The limitation of this presentation, of course, is that it is mainly drawn from Cresswell and Plano-Clark 2018 and 2016 with the Ivankova. There is a need to find and compare MMR designs in the extant literature in order to arrive at a broad understanding of the application of this methodology. For instance, Poth and colleagues describe a convergent sequential approach . Okay, sorry. Poth and colleagues, they describe the convergent design as a sequential approach, which is generally, as we have agreed, is regarded as parallel. They say it is a sequential approach. And I think what they are saying here is, remember, if you are one researcher and you try to implement convergent, try to implement the convergent design, you will find it a bit of a challenge because you are one person and therefore you cannot collect qualitative and quantitative data simultaneously. And this is why Poth and their colleagues actually think that what we call convergent is not convergent. So we should actually call it convergent sequential approach rather than calling it just parallel or concurrent. So there's need for more research to see whether or not such pronouncements are really valid in this mixed method research landscape. And we need also to have further research in order to have an inclusive way of classifying MMR design. Therefore, there's still work to be done in developing a unified taxonomy for MMR designs. And that will be my song. And I sang it not because I have an answer. I sang it because I have a song to sing. I thank you for your patience and participation. These are the lists of sources I've used. Some of you may be interested in reading this interesting book that I edited, and most of the ideas are articulated in a chapter in this book. And this book is available in the library. I'm not saying buy it. I'm just saying read it. It's all available. If you check in your library, you will be able to access it. There's even an electronic copy, which is actually in line with our hotel model of delivering knowledge. I thank you.